Welcome to the full comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A52 5G and the Galaxy A52. First of all, this is a 4K at 30 frames per second video clip from the front camera of both the phones. Now here, the Galaxy A52 5G has this advantage that the switch between the front and the rear cameras. These options are not available on the Galaxy A52. This video is giving you an idea about the color composition, the voice recording quality, the stability, and almost all other aspects that you might be concerned about when it comes to the front camera video recording of both these phones. They can record 1080p. These can record 1080p at 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second videos too. And I am now going to switch the resolution. One is a 1080p at 60 frames per second video from the front cameras of both the phones, and once again you can get an idea about the stability, color composition, the dynamic range, highlights, the saturation, and whatever you want to know about these phones. I am walking in my lawn, and you can definitely get a better idea about the stability when I walk. After this, I am going to switch to the front camera's 1080p at 30 frames per second mode. Let's go ahead and check that out. And lastly, this is 1080p at 30 frames per second video clip from both the phones. You will find this video stable now because it's a 30 frames per second mode, and usually this mode is quite stable on almost all the Android smartphones unless it's a low-end phone. And now here I would like to tell you that this is a lengthy video. In this video, first of all, we will go through the extensive camera comparison. After that, we'll do a little throttle and speed test, and then we'll compare the pricing, the battery, and other aspects of these smartphones. So if you are planning on buying one of these phones, this video is going to be the most important one for you. So yeah, let's go ahead and first of all, this is a 4K at 30 frames per second video clip from the A52 5G and the Galaxy A52. As I said, this video will give you an idea about the color composition. I am shooting outside in my lawn, and this is a bit of a cloudy day, so you will get an idea about the dynamic range, the saturation, sharpness, and almost all the things that you might be concerned about when it comes to the rear camera video recording on both the phones. Now, the optical image stabilization of these phones does not work in the 4K at 30 frames per second mode. It works in the 1080p at 30 frames per second mode, but I believe there should be some kind of electronic image stabilization in the play right now. Now, on the Galaxy A52 5G, you can switch between the front and the rear cameras while recording the videos, but you cannot do the same on the Galaxy A52. However, on both the phones, you have the video pause and play option as well. I mean, you can pause while recording a video and resume whenever you like. Now I will switch to the 1080p at 60 frames per second mode on both the phones. This one is a full HD 1080p at 60 frames per second video clip. Now in this mode, I don't believe that the electronic image stabilization is going to work either. Obviously the OIS not work in this mode, but I doubt that the EIS works in this mode. So this video will also give you an idea about the voice recording quality once again, the colors, and all the things that you want to know about these particular smartphones. So after this, I am going to switch to the 1080p at 30 frames per second video samples on both the phones. Alright, now this is ultra wide 1080p at 30 frames per second, and in a bit I'll switch to the wide mode because you can switch between the ultra wide and wide modes on both the phones, and it's a really good option. So this video will be the most stable of all the clips that you saw. That is because it's a 30 frames per second full HD video clip, and in this mode the optical image stabilization works. Obviously the OIS not come in when you are recording in the ultra wide mode. However, when I switch to the wide mode on both the phones, you will find the video getting a whole lot stable, and that is primarily because of the OIS coming into the action. And once again, I would like to tell you guys that I am not the judge for these videos. You guys are the judge, and you have to drop your feedback and analysis down in the comment section below. And right after these video samples, we'll head towards the other parts of our comparison. Alright, taking out of the way the camera specs first. Both phones have the same 64 megapixels camera. Some A52 and the A52 5G units are using the Samsung GW1 sensor, and some are using the Sony IMX682 sensor. My bet about these two phones is on the Sony IMX682 64 megapixel sensors. Other camera details are right on your screen. Camera apps on both the phones are the same for the most part. The A52 5G has a slightly different UI in the video mode as you can see on the screen. On the A52 5G, you can switch between the front and the rear camera while recording a video. You cannot do the same on the A52 4G. On both the phones, you can pause a video while recording, and you can also switch from the ultra wide to wide camera. Both handsets have the 60 frames per second video recording for front and the rear camera. Rest is all the same. Starting off with my own ultra wide image first. In the ultra wide mode for this first image, I find the colors a bit deep in the ultra wide mode of the 4G A52, and they are a bit accurate on the 5G A52. The images mostly look the same. The differences are really hard to spot except for the more bluish sky on the A52. The standard 16 megapixels mode on both sides, and once again, the differences are negligible. It's really hard to tell if one photo is better than the other. This one now is a portrait mode image and the same results on both the sides. 64 megapixels images on both sides. The standard A52 has blown off highlights in this high-res mode, while the 5G has them intact. The sky is a bit visible on the 5G. The colors are a bit boosted on 4G once again. Another ultra-wide image. The grass looks a bit different on both sides, but overall, this one is indeed another same image. And this one's normal image, same once again. While doing this camera comparison today, at one point I felt like, why am I even doing it? Because the images for the most part are the same. The amount of details is also the same. Camera sensors on both phones are the same. Yes, the image processing on both sides is different because of a different chipset, but as you can clearly see, it's not making a huge difference in these images for now. We will definitely see a lot of other pictures in this comparison to find out if we can see any differences, but so far the images on both sides look the same. I just find the colors a bit deep in the ultra-wide mode of the 4G A52 at times. The A52 5G has very nice high-res images too, which might be an edge because generally the high-res modes of the phones do not perform very good because the HDR and the scene optimizer in this mode do not work. So this phone's ISP is definitely helping it keep its high-res result up to the mark. It is helping this phone keep its dynamic range and its highlight management good. By the way, you guys also have to keep a close eye on all the images and drop your own analysis and feedback down in the comment section below. Here is your look at a 5x image from the digital zoom of both phones, and now this one is a 10x image on both the sides. A series of normal 16 megapixels images from both handsets. Honestly, I do find the colors a bit boosted on the 4G A52. They are not as boosted on the 5G A52, and remember, the colors are even more boosted on the A72. We will definitely do 5G A52 versus the A72 comparison in a couple of days, and a comparison between the 5G A52 and the 5G S20 Fan Edition is also lined up. Both phones produce great images for their price. I believe if it comes down to choosing one phone out of these two based on the camera performance, you shouldn't get confused at all because the cameras are more or less the same, and it certainly cannot become a deciding factor between these two particular phones. It should in fact come down to the value for money aspect. In all these images, the edge detection is the same. The color tone is also the same. The 4G A52 does feel slightly warm at times, but then there are instances when the other phone does the same. And I ended up telling myself that these phones are producing the same images. The differences are very minimal and not very easy to notice. Macro cameras are not very good on both the phones. Samsung still needs to fix the macro cameras on its smartphones. I wish Samsung does improve the macro cameras someday because they are not just up to the mark right now. Take a look at some low light and night mode images. Since you have to have a super steady hand to capture these images, it's not hard for things to go wrong. So a little bit of distortion that you are seeing here, it's not the fault of any of these phones. It is in fact my hand that shook a bit while capturing these images. Both phones take great overall night mode, ultra wide and the wide images, and I must say Samsung has enormously improved its night mode performance on these mid-range handsets, particularly because if you compare these new phones to their predecessors, you will fall in love with the new ones. In the end, we have the selfies. Now in the selfies, I found the saturation high on my face on the 5G A52. Saturation isn't that high on the 4G A52, and now it depends on you. What phone would you like to choose if selfies are your thing? The edge detection details on the face, the sharpness amount of details is same all across. Depth effect is the best on these phones. The images look almost 3D at times. The only thing that differentiates these phones is the saturation, which is high on the A52 5G. Both phones have a high-res 32 megapixel sensor on the front, and the result of the high-res mode is on your screen, just in case if you are a fan of such huge selfies. I've got the A52 5G in the black color and my 4G A52 is in the white color. And as far as the design and the build of these phones is concerned, it's same all across. Same finish, same weight, same feel, no differences. Both phones are water and dust resistant with that IP67 certification. Display size is the same, aspect ratio is the same, resolution is the same, bezel profile is the same, brightness nits are the same. The only thing that differentiates these displays is the refresh rate. With the 5G A52 you get 120Hz refresh rate and it's just 90Hz on the 4G A52. While the 120Hz looks like a great deal, it does have its implications too, and that too on the battery of the phone. I conducted two different battery drain tests of the 5G A52 and the 4G A52, and both tests prove that with 120Hz, the 5G A52 dies about 30 minutes earlier than the 4G A52, and remember, both phones pack a same 4500 mAh battery. Because the 120Hz refresh rate consumes more power, it also ends up increasing the temperature of the 5G A52 while the 4G A52 remains cool and calm. Now that I am talking about the battery, let me tell you about the charging times too. With a 15 watt charger, both phones take about 1 hour or 1 hour 30 minutes, and with a 25 watt charger, they take about 70 to 100 minutes, and the charging time depends on your ambient temperature too, so you may get a different charging time. Both phones ship with Android 11 and One UI 3.1 out of the box. The A52 4G did not have 60 frames per second video recording out of the box, but Samsung was kind enough to update this phone later on, and now we have 60 FPS video recording on both the A52 and the 5G A52. Software experience is quite good. Especially with the One UI 3, Samsung has improved the thing significantly. In both the phones, you can either put two SIM cards or a micro SD card along with one SIM card at the same time. Fingerprint scanner on both sides is the same and it works quite well. It's not Samsung's high-end scanner, it's the ordinary Samsung scanner and it does its job pretty well. I am carrying both the phones with a RAM of 8GB and internal storage of 128GB. However, you can find both phones with the internal storage of 256GB too, and as I said, the storage on both the phones can be expanded up to 1TB. On the 4G A52 we get the Snapdragon 720G chip, and to add 5G capabilities to the 5G variant, Samsung used the Snapdragon 750G chip, and this is really interesting. The incremental model identification number of the 5G phone's chip doesn't mean it is better. In fact, the 720G has 5% higher clock speed, the 750G on the other side has higher GPU frequency and it supports higher memory bandwidth and has a better instruction architecture. So on paper, The 750G might look like a better chip, but in real life, the difference between both chips is almost negligible. And in fact, I always got a higher Antutu score on my 4G A52, while the 5G A52's Antutu score was always a bit disappointing. Benchmark scores largely depend on the temperature and the overall condition of the phone, and you might be able to get a much better and higher score on the 5G A52, but my point is, there is no real life performance difference except for those additional 5G capabilities in the 750G chip. Whatever you do, play the games, use resource heavy applications, you will get somewhat similar results, and in fact, the graphic options in the games are also the exact same on both handsets. Both phones have a dual stereo speaker, the sound experience isn't different either. And with this we now approach the pricing. The A52 is priced at about $300 and the A52 5G is priced at about $480. For extra $180 you get 120Hz refresh rate, a newer chipset, I repeat newer, not enormously better, with of course the 5G capabilities. If you pay $180 less you get the A52 4G with slightly low refresh rate of 90Hz and an older 720G CPU with 4G only. Every other single thing on both the phones is the same. So the 4G A52 in my opinion is a much better and more value for money choice unless 5G is your main requirement. And even if 5G is your main requirement, I would still recommend waiting for my Galaxy A52 5G versus the S20 Fan Edition 5G full comparison because the 5G A52 is priced closely to the flagship S20 Fan Edition 5G. After that comparison, I'll be able to give you my final recommendation on the 5G A52. But for now, the 4G A52 is more than enough for me because 5G is not a thing in majority of the countries yet. You are free to disagree with me and drop your own analysis and thoughts about this comparison in the comments below. Hit the like button if you haven't yet and subscribe too. I will now sign off and see you all in the next one.